At this point in my life, I've played a substantial amount of games. But even if I've played most of the popular games, there's a number of games that I just never got around to. Many of the Pokemon games, for instance, are games that I just never played. But the exception to that is Red and Blue. There was a camping trip I took when I was about 16 or 17 years old, and we went to a new location and there was absolutely nothing for me to do. But luckily for me, I had just gotten both Red and Blue as a gift mistake from two separate people. And I spent the entire camping trip collecting every single one of those Pokemon by myself. Something about that original experience really hooked me, and this was coming from an RPG fan already, so when I played Pokemon, it doesn't seem like it should work. The game kind of seems a little too easy and seems like it's made for children, but I loved it. And that's why when I had a chance to play Monster Crown, I jumped at it in hopes that I could recapture some of that love that I had for those vintage Pokemon experiences. There is an important footnote to mention here, and that's that Monster Crown is currently in early access. It launched into early access back on July 31st, so it's been out for about a week now. But despite being in early access, I haven't found any critical bugs in the game that would dissuade me from wanting to play this game. There have been a couple funny ones, like for instance, a rock at one point in time decided it was just gonna follow me around for about an hour. The little bugs like this that I've run into have been mostly inconsequential and mostly just hilarious, but they're also few and far between, and they haven't really been game-breaking or game-impacting in my experience so far. The big surprise has been that this game does capture that nostalgic Pokemon experience, and I've had a lot of fun with it so far. The story for the game starts out a little bit cliche. You're a kid and you get to pick the way that your character looks and a color palette for your character as well. And then it opens up with you on a farm with your two parents. You are farmers of some sort, but you utilize the help of monsters, and that's part of how the world works that you exist in. You create pacts with monsters who are feral creatures, and once you have this pact with that monster, the monster and you work together and you have kind of this arrangement that you will just help each other out. It's kind of like Pokemon, only a little less slavey, but also the creatures in this game are a little more feral, or at least they're depicted to be so. The packs was one thing that I found to be a little bit weird. It almost seems like they could have used a different mechanic. The Pokemon Ball has some charm to it, and it's a really cool mechanic. The pact, because it's a contract-looking thing, just came off a little cold and heartless almost, as if there was no real relationship. Not that putting creatures in a ball necessarily creates a relationship, but it felt more formal and less chummy with the creature that you're commanding, which made you kind of care less for the creatures in this game than you do your Pokemon. After collecting your first couple monsters though, your parents set you on your merry way with a couple of fetch quest type items where you have to go and give a gift to a king and visit a couple towns on your way. And with that, you're off and playing. Capturing new monsters works a lot like Pokemon. First you have to weaken your opponent, and then they gauge whether they're going to sign their pact with you based on both how you quickly dismantled them, but also the level disparity between you and them. If you're a much higher level than them, they are much more likely to sign that pact with you. Battling also works very similar to a Pokemon game, where you have different elements and they all counteract each other in a big wheel. There are certain elements that are stronger to other types, and then it goes around in a circle. The interesting thing about this one was all the different types of monsters in this game were more based on dispositions than they were elements like they are in Pokemon. There isn't a rock type and a fire type. There's like a strong-willed type monster, and it does go around in a circle, but I found the naming scheme and the basis for this wheeled system to be a little bit forgettable. In the end, I just memorized the colors and tried to figure out which one was weak to which one, and then just used that. There's a number of different special attacks too that will lower defense or poison an enemy as well, and that can help you and help keeps the combat a little more veritable and a little more strategic. I have found the combat in this game is a notch up as far as difficulty is concerned in relation to those early Pokemon games. While not overly difficult, you will have to learn how to beat certain enemies depending on which monsters you have, but once you've figured out the key to defeating easily any specific monster, you'll just do that same thing over and over again, which can get a little bit repetitious, but I found it was still a little bit more fun than that original Pokemon experience, at least in terms of strategic battles with your monsters. One of the cooler mechanics that gets introduced a little bit into the game is the synergy system, and this is a system where if you swap out your monsters over and over again, you will build up kind of a limit break bar almost. Then when you finally attack, if you haven't attacked after a number of swaps, all of that bar gets used in your attack, and it can have different effects depending on exactly what you do, but mostly you just hit a lot harder. This added another strategic element to the battle system and helped keep it not get too monotonous over time. Finally, the feature that the developers of this game boasted about the most was the breeding system, and I think that they have something to boast about here. Monster Crown started as a Kickstarter, and on that Kickstarter page they cite how they have been very dissatisfied with breeding systems in old monster collector games. See, in most of those older games, when you breed different monsters, you end up with just one of the monsters being the primary, and then maybe you have some abilities that transfer over to that monster, so nothing new is created. What they've tried to do in Monster Crown, and I feel like they've succeeded quite well here, is that when you breed two monsters, you get an entirely new monster. While I have loved all of the gameplay elements so far, and it's really struck that nostalgic chord, I have to say that I take issue a little bit with the story so far. And a big disclaimer here, I have not completed this game. I'm about 5 hours in. I've experienced the majority of the gameplay mechanics. This is more of a first look, but from what I've seen with the story, I am not drawn into any of the characters or any of what's going on thus far. I'd have to say that even if the story were to get particularly good at this point, I do have some criticisms with how slow the story has been to ramp up. There really hasn't been any character building with any of the characters that I've met. All of the subplots have seemed very cliche so far, but I'm really hoping for something to kind of unify it all together and make a little bit more sense and drive character growth or something. So far, I haven't seen that. It's just been more of a vehicle to drive you back into the gameplay elements. And I'm satisfied with that enough, but I think that the story needing a cohesive movement and some sort of progression, some sort of reason for me as a player to care about this journey, that would really go a long way from moving this from being just a good game into a truly great game. But even though I've only found the story to be merely serviceable so far, I have found the music to be spot on for exactly what this game is trying to do. If the goal in this game is to relive and bring back that nostalgic moment, every tune that I have heard so far in this game has done exactly that. In fact, over the last couple days with this game, I have found the tunes getting stuck in my head, and I've been humming them as I walk around the house, which is something that not very many games have managed to do for me in the last few years. So overall, my initial thoughts on Monster Crown after playing it for about 5 hours, this is a really fun game, and if you really liked those original Pokemon games and you don't think that they're out of date, you should seriously consider taking a look at this one. I have had a lot of fun here, and I plan to continue playing this game. In fact, it's very likely that you'll see more content for this game show up on my channel because I'm interested in possibly completing my journey through this and keeping an eye on it as it goes through early access. This may be one of those sleeper games where it comes out with some mediocre attention that builds on itself over time because what they have created so far has been very impressive. So check out Monster Crown on the Steam store. It's available today for $14.99, which I think is a pretty reasonable price for this game. Make sure to like this video if you liked it, subscribe to the channel, and until next time, this has been Pixel.